The third reason is that the debt levels continue to be low. It's low in corporate, it's low in government. I mean, right now, from 39% GDP to debt ratio, the Philippines went from 39% to 51%, 52%, I think today. And even at that level, it's still one of the lowest in the world. Yes, we borrowed a lot at a very, very short span of time, like 9 months. We went from 39% to 52, 53%, which is shocking many people. But the reality is, we're just making up for all the years that we didn't borrow money. We're making up for all the years that we did not do deficit management, deficit spending. We didn't do pump priming in the economy, very limited. And now we're about to do that.
Hi everyone, we are back once again with, I believe, one of the greatest minds in the property management space in the Philippines. We have the CEO, the chairman of Leechiu Property Consultants, David Leechiu, back in the podcast. David, we are closing the year already. How's everything?
Yeah, Marvin, thank you for that kind introduction. And how is everything? I think everything is fine. Well, not fine. I mean, things are a mess right now, but it's not as bad as what people think. And I'm so happy to see property being so resilient. Like, if you consider, for example, what my colleague Pam Angel said a few days ago in our press briefing, you have to consider that the economy contracted 9% full year, more or less between, some say 6, some say 9, some say 11. Anyway, the contractions happened, significant contractions happened, and yet the property sector, for the most part, is either flat or appreciating, right? So you would have been good holding on to property because it retained its value for the most part. And in certain cases, you're even way ahead.
At the first quarter, no, they were projecting that there will be a large crash in the property market, and then right now, as what you mentioned, we are relatively holding its value. What contributed to that? What makes our market special compared to other cities around the world where we saw significant volatility in prices?
The first thing is that the economy's engines are not here. Therefore, very few things can mess it up. And the politicians can have a hard time messing it up. For example, overseas remittances, right? Regardless of what happens to the Philippines, the remittances keep flowing. Whether we are in good times or in bad times, and what we've seen today is that remittances will increase as things become worse. And then household spending in construction were up during this COVID crisis because the overseas Filipinos that went back home realized that, wow, ang dami pa palang hindi nagagawa sa bahay na kailangan natin ayusin. Diba? And so all home stock is up, because of that. The second thing is that the BPO sector does really well in a crisis because as the whole world goes through crisis, more jobs are created in the Philippines. We become more important in the global stage because of the BPO sector. And that is going to increase significantly in the next 2 years, 2021, 2022, because many companies now have figured out what part of the organization needs to be cut and what will remain. From what has remained, they will figure out now how much of that they can offshore to Philippines and India. Why these two countries? Because these are the only two countries in the world that's English-speaking where you can move tens of thousands of jobs very quickly at a very cheap rate, cheapest than anywhere else in the world. And third, improve productivity significantly. And that is where we are ahead over India. Because while India has the numbers in terms of scale, in terms of cheap price, because they're 15% cheaper than us, talo sila sa productivity natin. And one metric I can give you is attrition rate. Attrition is the amount of people who leave you every year. So if I say 50%, 50 to 60% is the attrition rate of Philippines, it means that 60% of your people that you hired in January, by August, wala na yung mga tao na yun. 60% of your people would leave by August, September, October. Okay? While 60% is very high for you and me, right? I mean, I'd go crazy running a business where 60% of my people leave every year.
Yeah.
In India, it is 90%
Wow.
to 110%. In the US, it is 110 to 130%.
Wow.
Which means 100% of the people you hired in January, by September, wala na sila. That's how insane it is. That's why, as much as politicians in the US want to say, hey, why are you moving jobs offshore? The real answer to that is nobody there onshore wants to do these jobs, and that's why they have to move it somewhere else. That's the main reason why the economy continues to do well. Number two is that I'm glad that because of the very, very relevant hardships that the people of the Philippines went through in the 70s, in the 80s, and early 90s, and late 90s to 2000, we actually learned to save. Right? And that's why after China and Japan, the next highest savings rate in Asia is Philippines.
Oh.
I can't believe that, right?
Oh.
And yes, our savings rate is low 20s, low 20%, which looks like we are not saving at all compared to the Chinese and the Japanese, who are the savings rate are at 40%, right? The reality is that 20% is one of the highest in the world, because in the West, the savings rate is 1 to 2%.
Oh.
Which is kind of insane. The third reason is that the debt levels continue to be low. It's low in corporate, it's low in government. I mean, right now, from 39% GDP to debt ratio, the Philippines went from 39% to 51%, 52%, I think today. And even at that level, it's still one of the lowest in the world. Yes, we borrowed a lot at a very, very short span of time, like 9 months. We went from 39% to 52, 53%, which is shocking many people. But the reality is, we're just making up for all the years that we didn't borrow money. We're making up for all the years that we did not do deficit management, deficit spending. We didn't do pump priming in the economy, very limited. And now we're about to do that. So I think in summary, those are the 3-4 main reasons. The drivers of the economy are not here. The savings rate has improved. The debt levels have been low.
I'm so curious on this now. As the economy starts to reopen, you mentioned about more BPOs coming here. How do you think work from home will play into that in terms of the usage also of offices over the next one or 2 years, especially that we're still in this predicament as of now?
So work from home has been very tricky. In the upper class, it's working fine. They love it. Or some people love it, or maybe I should say 3 months, 4 months into it, everyone loved it. Towards the 5th month, everyone's like saying, come on, honey, I need you out of the house. Work from home will be very difficult for Philippines. Number one, the biggest risk that companies face when they do work from home is data privacy, data security, and corporate fraud. Which, as you know, corruption is a big issue in the Philippines. Very few people talk about it now, but corruption remains to be a big issue in the Philippines. And it's not just in government. It is also in the private sector, especially in the private sector. And just imagine all your checks and balances in the office, all of a sudden have disappeared. All your accounting files that used to be locked up in a shelf, isolated from everybody, all your HR files, all the bidding files, whether you're bidding for tissue paper or catering services or insurance policies for life and non-life, all that now is rigged, all of it. Okay, and many companies will not realize that until maybe third, fourth quarter of next year, when they go back to the office, they check the files, they reconcile everything that was on shelf and off shelf. That's right now scattered in the homes of many people. All the open book policies and all the contract rigging that's going on today. All the data security that is now gone. And we're not feeling that yet because we're not realizing the impact of that. But we're going to pick up those things, those pieces in the next 1 or 2 quarters. And then it's going to blow up in the third quarter. You just imagine, just remember in the last 5 years, how many banks got hit by scammers who worked with them, for those banks. And I won't need to name them, no? Very prominent bank, top 3 bank. All the top 3 banks had prominent breaches in security. And that's with the entire fortress around them. Eh, ano pa kaya nilabas mo na lahat ng data? Ano pa kaya nangyari doon sa data na yun? So those are the things that people will realize. And that is the biggest risk. The second risk in work from home is that people are indeed going crazy. Many executives have told me, one client told me, which applies to so many clients, right? Is that, David, when I leave the house and I enter my office, as soon as I walk through those doors of the office, I enjoy respect, admiration from people. I say one thing and people obey. I have authority. I have power. I have prestige, I have position, I have title. And every time I go back home, as soon as I enter the doorway of the home, that power and authority and respect is shed. And then I go to a place where nobody listens to me. I have no authority. I have to be subject to a higher power right now. And that person tells me what to do, all the time. So that's the CEO level. Or the executive committee mancom level in the organization. And you go all the way down to the lowest ranks, the best toilet facilities are in the office. The best food they eat are provided by the office. The safe working environment is in the office. Nobody's gonna batter you in the office physically. There's no domestic violence in the office. If there is any harassment, it is very limited, right? And you can do your thing, and you have esteem because people respect you in the office. When you go home, there's domestic violence. You can't get along with people. Your 20 other relatives who live with you and your in-laws who live with you, you're all squabbling. There's this whole power play, this hierarchy. And then the third thing is that there's too many distractions. Bandwidth is the easiest problem to solve. What you can't solve is air conditioning. What you can't solve is insulation, roof insulation. Do you know how hot it is when it's not raining? When your bubong is a tin roof? I don't know if you've ever lived in a house na tin roof lang with no insulation. I mean, I've lived for a few years of my life, quite a number of years in my life with just the tin roof. And it is not comfortable. When all your life you've lived in a tin roof and you don't know what it's like to not live outside a tin roof, that's okay. You don't know what you're missing. But for certain hours of the day, you're in a tin roof environment. And then in 10 hours of the day, you are in a comfortable air-conditioned office environment. And then you go back to the tin roof, that kind of drives you crazy. You have all these kids, I have webinars every day, 2 to 3, sometimes 6 webinars a day. and then my kids crash into my meeting, or the dog escapes and crashes my meeting. And what can I do, right? I mean, okay, that's cute. Your daughter crashes her meeting, your dog crashes her meeting, but sometimes it's hard, you know. Like for example, my credit card provider calls me and asks for validation of my purchases, right? But who's this person calling me? He's calling me from some really noisy background. I hear tricycles, chickens. Is he walking? Is he outside on the street because it's tumugulo in the house? Is it raining? What's going on? And then to the point where I have to ask him, how do I know that you're from the bank? Give me proof that you're in the bank. You ask me all these questions. Before I answer all those questions, you tell me, you give me proof that you're from the bank.
Based on all of that, it's safe to make an assumption that even though that there's work from home, it doesn't really pose a big threat to offices
No.
moving forward. Okay,
No.
very, very.
And the biggest testament to that is that many of the clients that we service, and these are the biggest, largest organizations in the world, they're in the top 10 market cap globally.
Mhm.
They have 10,000, 20,000 employees in the Philippines. They've got 200, 300,000 square meters of office space. They have all renewed them. No fail. Every single one of these companies have renewed their leases in the last 18 months. Okay? And the most scary renewals were the ones that were done in the last 9 months. They all renewed it for 5 to 7 years.
Wow. Wow, interesting. You mentioned also about remittances. As more Filipinos come back home and as more people send money in, from a residential point of view, what tier do you think it will possibly go to? Or do you think people will just keep buying extra houses as we've been seeing the trend that more people are buying outside the mega cities in the Philippines?
I think more and more capital is going to come from the overseas remittances. You know, I always say that, I don't know if I mentioned this in some of your talks, that I'm a big believer of the overseas remittances because right now, with the 10 million, 11 million people, or 11.5 million people abroad, sending $30 billion a year, that $30 billion, most of that is guilt money. It's guilt money. Guilt money is like, oh, you know, na-aksidente yung anak ko, and then you're a kamag-anak, you're a pinsan, you get calls from all these people asking for financial aid from all your relatives. That's guilt money. You send $50, $100, $200, malaki ning $200. May namatay, o sige, $300. Right? May na-atake, okay, $400. Ganun lang. Tuition fee, pabili ng taho sa umaga, I don't know. But there will come a time when the top 20% of the 11 million abroad are going to build businesses in the Philippines. They're going to set up organizations with global footprints. I mean, we see it all the time. Many of my friends who are architects in Canada, in the US, Australia, in the UK, they are opening offices here to service clients abroad. So BPO operation na yun for architects and construction firms in their countries. And they're small, they would be considered small to medium enterprises. And you're going to see more and more of those things. You're going to see more and more people say, wow, I really believe in the Philippine story now. Before, I didn't. For many years, for 20 years, I didn't. 15 years ago, I was in a plane with PAL coming home from Chicago, right? Hop, all the way till we get to Manila. Naiya, 15 years ago, right? Just try to remember, Marvin, what it was like to the skyline was like 15 years ago. You know what the guy beside me was saying, who's never been to Philippines in 20 years. He left 20 years ago. This is the first time he's coming back. And at that time, yung mga PAL planes, sa umaga naglaland from the US. Diba? So kita mo yung skyline. And nagmura siya. When he opened the window, when he woke up, opened the window, nagmura siya. He said, blah, blah, blah. Walang nagbago. That was 15 years ago. And 15 years ago to today, we built something like 7, 8 million square meters of office space.
Wow.
You know, in the last 15 years. Most of that happened in the last 10 years. And we're building another 5 million square meters. And to give you what it's like, the flavor, the entire Singapore office market is only 6 million, 7 million square meters.
Wow.
We built 1.5 times of the entire Singapore office market in Manila just in the last 10 years. So there genuinely is progress happening. And that all these fundamentals that we've talked about is going to propel us for the next 20 years. What should have been a tax base under PAGCOR, which most people in the POGO sector are complying with, pinagpatong-patong natin lahat ng taxes. And then we said, okay, you either pay this or you shut down now. And then they say, you know what? Bye. And because of that, the POGO sector has shed something like 20%, 25% of all the space they occupy today. And another 20% of all the residential space which they occupy today, which is big, right? The economic impact of all that is gone.